Welcome to Lesson 3-2. As you can see by the learning target, by the end of the lesson you will be able to say, I can multiply whole numbers and non-unit fractions. To do that, you're going to use what you learned and understood about multiplying whole numbers with unit fractions. Sounds like a lot, I know, but don't worry about it because I promise you got this. Let's take the example of 1/5 times 40. When we look at this problem, we have a unit fraction, 1/5, being multiplied by the whole number, 40. And we know that the answer we will get is definitely going to be greater than a fifth, but it will have to be smaller than 40. And the reason for that is because we're finding part of 40. When we multiply 1/5 times 40, we're finding 1/5 of 40. So 1/5 is only a part of 40. And that is the truth anytime we are multiplying a unit fraction times a whole number. The product that we get will be greater than the fraction, but less than the whole number. We also know that when we do the computation to solve this problem, we can rewrite it as 1/5 times 40 over 1, because 40 over 1 would be the same as 40. And when we have a problem like this, we can simply multiply the numerators. 1 times 40 would be 40, and 5 times 1 would be 5. And 40 over 5 is the same as 40 divided by 5, which would be 8. So there you can see that our product, 8, is in fact less than 40, which is the whole number, but it is greater than 1/5, our fraction. And we can see a model of that if we imagine that we have this bar and that the bar itself would be equal to 40. The total bar equaled 40. We could imagine the bar being broken into 5 equal parts, and that each part would be equal to 8. And there are 5 parts, and so 5 times 8 would be 40. I hope you don't feel like a deer in headlights right now, because we're about to move on to the next level. Using what you know about finding 1/5 of 40, what do you think 3/5 of 40 might be? Pause your video for a second and see if you can use the model to help you out. Hopefully you were able to see that if you circled or highlighted 3 parts of the model, that you would have a total of 24. 8 plus 8 plus 8 would be 24. One of the rectangles, or part of the rectangle, represented 8, so we had to take 8 and multiply it by 3. So if 1/5 of 40 is 8, then 3/5 of 40, or 3/5 times 40, would have to be 24. Okay guys, don't get worried. Don't be freaked out. There's no reason to quack up. We're going to practice another one right now. Let's imagine, instead of finding 1/5 of 40, that now we're going to find 1/6 of 42. So again, using what we learned from lesson 3-1, we know that would be the same as 1/6 times 42 over 1, which would be the same as getting 42 over 6, and you know that's just a fancy way to say 42 divided by 6, which would be 7. So 1/6 of 42 is 7. We can now think about how would we apply that to find, say, 5/6 of 42. So if 1/6 of 42 is 7, then 5/6 of 42 would be the same as 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7, which would be 35. But it would be much easier to simply take 7 and multiply it by 5. 7 times 5 is 35. Here's a few samples for you to try, but don't be a cheetah and skip to the end. Pause your video, give yourself a moment to think through them, and then check your work. Hopefully you were all able to find the product when you multiplied the whole number by the unit fraction in each box. In the first box, we ended up with 27 over 3, which led us to a product of 9. We see that right here. In the second box, we ended up with 20 over 50, which is a product of 4. In the next box, we have 48 over 8, which is again same as 48 divided by 8, so that gave us 6. And then in the last box, we ended up with 63 over 9, which is 63 divided by 9, and ultimately a product of 7. Then I'm hoping that you were able to use what you got as the product when you multiplied by the unit fraction and find what you get when you multiply by the non-unit fraction. So if 1/3 of 27 is 9, then 2/3 would be 18, because 9 times 2, or 9 plus 9, gave us 18. And the next box, that you saw that 4/5 of 20 would be 16, because I took 4 and then I multiplied it by 4, because I'm really saying it would be 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. In the third box, we took 6 that we got as the 1/8 of 48, and then multiplied that by 6. So we had 36. And finally, 7/9 of 63 would be 49, because 7 times 7 is 49. Oh dear, there's no reason to doubt yourself. Ha ha. Mrs. Doubtfire thinks you can do it, dear. Give it a shot. Just 2 more sample problems. Pause your videos and give it a try. So here we are. We first found what the result of multiplying by the unit fraction was, and we can find that 1/5 of 45 is 9. That means that 3/5 of 45 would be 27. Why? Because 9 times 3 is 27. We can show it again on a model. If 1/5 was equal to 9, then 3/5 would be 9 plus 9 plus 9, or 9 times 3, and all 3 of those 9s together make 27. On the second problem, we found that 1/7 of 56 would be equal to 8, so 5/7 of 56 would be equal to 40. Why? Because 8 times 5 would make 40. And again, we could see it on the model. If we have 8 5 times, because 1/7 was 8, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/7. 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 would be 40. Just one last thing before we go. I do want us to go back to thinking about our rules of multiplying fractions and whole numbers and the result or the products we get when we do that. Now we already know that when we multiplied a unit fraction by a whole number, that the product was going to be greater than the fraction, but less than the whole number. And we said that's because we were finding part of 24. So 4 was greater than a sixth, but 4 was less than 24. So the result of multiplying a whole number by a unit fraction is that the product will be greater than the fraction, but less than the whole number. But if you look down underneath that, when we take 5/6 of 24, we get 20. Notice anything similar? You should see that what we have again is a product that is less than the whole number factor, but greater than the fraction factor. So, in other words, 20 is greater than 5/6, but 20 is less than 24. So whether we are multiplying a unit fraction times a whole number or a non-unit fraction times a whole number, we have a very obvious rule that the product, whenever you multiply by a fraction, the product will be greater than the fraction, but less than the whole number factor. One more time. Whenever you multiply a whole number by a unit fraction or a non-unit fraction, the product will be greater than the fraction, but less than the whole number.